just right now, there's just so much suffering.
The journey home has never been more difficult for Ingrid Webb.
Right now, it's still extremely hard because of the hike, and we have to take care of the farm.
She treks over the narrowest portion of this massive lava field, a scarring reminder of Kilauea's most recent eruption. It's a black rock river that rips through some of the most fertile farmland in all the Hawaiian island chain. No longer the raging rapid of liquid fire it was just 1 year ago. The sun beating down on this hard and charred earth makes the scorching hike even more grueling.
So this is the 10-minute hike. When we get there, it'll be another 35 minutes to get to the farm. We have a 15-acre farm, so we supply organic citrus all over the island. To be fully operational again, it would take at least 5 years to plant new trees and be full-on production again. Well, my main concern is, if there's accidents, like if we're working on the farm, that's really number one. You can't just go to a hospital.
Ingrid and her husband have 4 young children. They live in one of the dozens of homes inside the Kapohoki Puka, an area completely isolated, surrounded and cut off by the lava flows.
Just want to move back home and just be here.
At least she has a home to go back to.
It was our nest for the rest of our lives. Well, I'm really glad I'm not underneath there since it opened up in my front yard.
Leilani Estates was the very first subdivision to bear witness to Madam Pele's power. Linnell Hazemer hasn't been back until now.
It was our retirement home. It was income. It was also a place that was just so alive.
She lived here on a portion of Luana Street that's no longer there. It's where Linnell and her husband were just hours before the eruption began, dealing with a different emergency.
Well, I was in the kitchen fixing lunch and just put my hands up and said, I have to go lay down.
Linnell had a seizure.
I was gone.
She was in a coma.
I feel like my body's very connected to the earth, so maybe there was some kind of awareness. My next memory is being in a hospital bed, and I think this was 2 days later, and I'm sort of waking up, and all of a sudden the bed starts to shake, and that's when the big blow happened.
Oh my God.
This is what her awakening looked like.
Hey, you guys okay?
A massive 6.9 magnitude earthquake, rattling every inch of Hawaii Island.
And I'm just laying there going, I don't know what's going on, I really don't. I was on a lot of medications, so I'm not sure exactly when it was that Phil said, our house is gone. It felt like, I don't want to get too metaphysical about it, but it felt like this isn't something you need to see.
The Hazemers' home was one of more than 700 that were destroyed during the eruption, the single most destructive eruptive event in the U.S. since the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens. Like many others, Linnell is now haunted by the havoc and suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder.
I had no idea what it could do to you, how you could fly into a rage, even with somebody you love for no apparent reason, or just dive into a depression where you didn't want to get out of bed or eat.
What used to be home for the Hazmers now sits under this massive Mars-like steaming cinder cone, all that's left of their retirement dream and the once furious Fissure 8.
Everything's on loan. Everything's temporary. And be grateful for what you do have.
During the eruption, fissure fountains like these fed miles-long lava flows, unstoppable forces that went over the immovable objects in their way as they wound toward the ocean. Nearly 900 acres of new land were created as the flow engulfed Kapoho Bay, a staggering representation of just how much molten rock was thrust forth from the depths of Kilauea during the entirety of the eruption. To put that into perspective, Interstate 90 crisscrosses the country from Boston to Seattle, a 3,000-mile drive that passes through parts of more than a dozen states. Scientists from the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory say the volume of lava that came out of the ground last year would cover 2 lanes of that highway from coast to coast, in a layer of lava more than 70 feet high. Back at the Kipuka, the fiery flows have become blackened barricades, blocking access to the roads that were once the pathways to Ingrid's property.
But sometimes we do multiple hike in and out. Like we bring a lot of stuff, we leave it here, go back, grab more stuff, leave it here. Pretty much start moving back to the farm.
After the back-breaking trek, residents must still make their way to homes and farms. Maneuvering once inside the Kipuka isn't easy. People here are getting creative.
Like gas, diesel, our food, water. But the big stuff like fertilizer and all that, we fly that in. Yeah, I even flew in our ATV.
The set of wheels is useful for cutting down the next leg of the journey.
It's so exhausting after all the work. Like every minute counts. You have to do a lot of work when you're in here. We're almost there.
She's headed to her family's home and citrus orchard, an entire livelihood that barely survived the lava and wildfire inferno that followed. For the most part, the property is still intact, but it's far from operational.
Usually, this is where my kids would ride their bike all the way to the farm. But now we can't go that way, so we have to cross multiple private property, our neighbors, to get to the farm.
Looking from above, it's easy to see how close Ingrid came to losing everything.
Everyone has different stories. Everyone is greatly affected by not having the road.
Oh, it's the habit. I look on the road to see if somebody's coming, right?
There aren't many people living full-time in the Kipuka, and there are even fewer vehicles. They were left behind prior to the area being lava-locked.
Unpaid Uber service.
Oshi Simsarian has one of them.
That we left it, because you didn't know when the lava was coming, what to leave and what to take. And I am very ready to have a road, because the main dilemma, of course, is supplies and getting in and out. And I am 68 years old, so carrying a 50-pound backpack gets a little tiresome.
Before the destructive force of nature created the freshest new land on the planet, Highway 132 connected the people of the Kipuka to the rest of Puna. The roughly 8-mile-long path once spanned from Pahoa in the west to Kapoho Road along the coast. With most of Kapoho destroyed, those with homes still intact are fighting for road repairs in the other direction, where a 1.6-mile wall of new rock now towers over the artery.
But we didn't feel like the lava per se was going to get our house. It was the road access.
Oshie and her husband's home sits atop a hill and thus still stands overlooking the place where the flows that circumvented her home collided with one another on their way to the coast. More homes were lost in Kapoho than in any other area during the eruption. Oshie's is one of the 50 properties that remain.
Yeah, there are a few other people living here full time, and then they're getting to be more and more that are here, kind of half time.
In Leilani Estates, residents wish they had a way to keep people out. As you enter the subdivision, with its wholesome welcome sign and kids playing in the street, it seems like any other neighborhood. But a few blocks in, where mutilated mementos have been scattered and memories have been left behind, it's apparent it's still anything but.
We just want it to be healing and peaceful.
Any tranquility that tries to hide in the steamy, dreamlike place vanishes as it nears the new end of Leilani Avenue.
We'll just drive in, past the house, and try and drive out onto the lava. And what do? I mean, we can call the police only so many times before the police get tired of coming out.
The attraction is obvious for these lava tourists. A monumental fissure mound that now acts as a headstone in this lava-filled graveyard of buried homes and broken properties.
I wish there was a gate to help us kind of mitigate the traffic in here, because I can't even pick weeds without somebody asking to come in, and I don't mind sharing as long as they're respectful, but what's happening now is they're driving over our brand new grass that we just planted. I mean, it took us thousands of dollars of tractor work just to get down to the dirt and get the soil to where it will take anything. So once we get the plants in, they just run right over them. And that's hard because it's blood, sweat, and tears out here to try and repair this.
Hi, lava dog. Good boy. That was one of our biggest concerns was the dogs.
Stacy Welch had only been in her newly built home for about a month before having to evacuate.
I mean, there's no words to describe what I saw. And every morning when I wake up and I come out here and I'll sit here and have coffee and I think, wow, what did I just go through? And boy, was that a story to tell. I mean, it gave us complete PTSD. Even now when a door slams or if a loud noise or if someone comes up, I mean, it's so scary. It was like bombs dropping and you never knew where they were coming from.
She ended up staying at the Pahoa Red Cross shelter for more than 120 days.
Well, there was drugs, there was just fighting, a lot of just fighting, dogs. We had cats, you know, we had all these animals and all these different personalities.
On top of the stress of shelter life, Stacy was also without a job. She works at a restaurant within the Volcano National Park, which was forced to close for months as the eruption raged on.
Everything I've built here has been on my work, you know, my cash. I mean, I've sunk everything in to live here in paradise without any bills. So I thought, well, there's no insurance, there's no mortgage, but now we have to start with absolutely nothing if we lose everything. So that was very, very up and down scary.
Stacy's home survived, and this bizarre landscape is literally her new backyard.
I keep all my gear under my bed just in case. Thanksgiving was really bad out here, and then we've had 1 or 2 days where you can actually taste the sulfur and stuff like that.
She says it's clear that some who marvel at what remains don't respect what once was. As they plod across her property, she tries her best to stay positive, despite the pesky interruptions.
It's learning how to deal with them in a polite, respectful manner and letting them know that people are trying to heal here, and now is not the time to be doing this.
Oh, this one's open.
There have been other unwanted guests.
Yeah, I guess somebody had a little bit of fun in here.
In places like Noni Farms, trespassers were only part of the problem. Abandoned by residents who sought only safety, homes left empty were ransacked.
In some cases, even windows were stolen out of houses, not just the contents of the house, but the actual structures of homes were taken.
Andy Andrews is part of the ramped-up neighborhood watch in Leilani Estates.
A lot of people left just out of fright. They couldn't be comfortable being here, so they walked away from houses, and sadly, very small but very horrible group of people took advantage of that situation and immediately started stealing belongings and breaking into homes and living in those homes, moving in as squatters and running drug operations out of those homes.
The police performed some sweeps in an attempt to protect the properties left in limbo, but the last one was months ago, and residents say the problem still lingers.
It was a tiny group of people, but it really showed how a tiny group of terrible people can have a huge impact on a large group of wonderful people.
The spring in Puna has brought new vegetation to the fire-scorched ground. Spider webs adorn the lava rock blocking Highway 132. But there is no sign of any construction or clearing work here.
At Road 132, temporary road over 132, that would be the access for the beginning. I have water.
Nancy Seifers is another Kapoho resident displaced and in need of an easier way home.
And then we're going to go into the Kipuka inland where there's like 24 of us still standing.
The treacherous lava hike is a little too much for her.
I'm old, so it was brutal. And I didn't think I was going to make it back out.
So today, she's flying in.
Here's the main channel, stretching straight down.
I'm going to hand you this water jug.
Nancy has only had the luxury of hitchhiking on a helicopter one other time.
Newspaper still from when I was packing. Oh, I want those shorts. I did lose, my partner and I, we lost a house on this 13-acre farm. But as you can see, this one stands pristine. When I was still in here, still moving out, evacuating, Fissure 18 was going right by there. But not having access to it since May, I went back to work. I had to relocate, take out a mortgage, get a new place to live. I was evacuated for 10 weeks, and I couldn't find any place to rent because by then 700 people had lost their homes, and we were all looking for a place to rent.
I almost feel like I have survivor's guilt because I have a house left standing, and some of my friends and neighbors here, they lost everything. They don't even have a house standing.
Nancy has been a vocal advocate for access, asking what so many in her Kipuka community want to know. What's taking so long to get Highway 132 reopened?
We asked these folks, where else in the United States would, hundreds of people not be able to return with such a simple road solution? Speed up this road process, cut down some of the engineering and surveying and risk assessments and talk story meetings, right, with sandwiches and cookies. We don't need to talk story anymore. These folks want to get back to their livelihoods.
I keep saying I understand the impatience, and I'll just stand pat of what did happen. We said after 6 months is over, we'll go in as fast as we can. And we've learned from past mistakes of going back too soon, lava too hot, the eruption reoccurring, or putting people in harm's way. I resent a little bit when people say that arbitrary number. Of course it's arbitrary. If we knew for a fact, it wouldn't be.
April marked 6 months since the eruption's end. The county now has a plan to reopen the road, but it's going to take until the fall. For many of those in the Kipuka, it's a weight they literally can't afford.
Just needs fertilizing because they're starting to grow again.
As she spends more and more time away from home, the financial strain on Ingrid mounts. During the eruption, she and her husband were forced to evacuate to a nearby shelter with a newborn and 3 other kids.
So pretty much we moved 5 times since eruption. So we're hoping that this would be the last.
Now living in a rental, a year later, there's a new struggle.
It's been difficult to pay all the bills because there's just so much bills right now, and we don't have help. So we're pretty much on the edge now. Like, this is our last option, is to move back.
It's obvious that a move across an entire lava field wouldn't be easy. In the interim, access into the Kipuka is being granted by an unlikely ally. While residents wait for repairs to Highway 132, a temporary solution has been cut through the lava by Puna Geothermal Venture. The oft-villainized plant was damaged by the flow, which covered wells and destroyed several structures. Some have gone so far as to accuse the power plant of causing the eruption, a claim USGS scientists have publicly debunked.
It's not coincidental that the lava came up right around geothermal. And the cultural perspective, we're not troublemakers. In fact, we try to handle everything with grace, like our kupuna teach us. But our kupuna say they're tired of talking, nobody's listening, let Pele take care of them.
In the wake of all the bad press, PGV has carved out a private road across its property. The Kipuka residents will be allowed to use it, but even that's not without controversy and restrictions.
Given that we've got a new reality out there, right?
Many are apprehensive.
They're not asking us anymore.
But what other option do they have?
Well, I'm happy that people are going to be able to drive in and get to work on their places and their farms, their houses and their farms. But I have been hiking in about 3 or 4 times a week, and our hiking access is about to be closed down, so I'm a little sad about that.
We're trying to do our best to help all you guys out. We're a private entity that have no obligations, but we feel for you and we want to help you out as much as possible.
It's kind of hard for us like farmers because we work on the land like constantly. We're trying to fix it, fertilize, weed whack. So I don't know how it's going to be another bump, but I think it's easier because we have a road now. We can bring machinery, so that helps.
Oh, this is the way to home, the residents, the people's homes that way.
This is the way to the post office, the store,
yeah,
the bank, all the stuff you take for granted.
Finally able to escape the Kipuka, Oshi's little red truck was one of the first vehicles to use the new road.
Of course, it didn't happen as fast as we wanted it, but it never does.
Right there, back on home ground, right there. We're home, kids.
Residents are grateful for the new access, but it's not the permanent road to recovery they were hoping for.
This is not the answer, we know. This is really a blessing, but 132 is the answer. Yeah, if we can do this, we can open 132.
Susie Osborne knows what it's like to suddenly find yourself displaced.
Even though the event has stopped or ceased for the moment, the challenges continue.
At the start of the eruption, Susie's house in Leilani Estates was quickly surrounded by massive cracks.
Chicken skin, top, up and down, my whole being is just vibrating. I barely sleep at night from the ground moving and all the sounds and the energy and the life force.
As if the devastation wasn't already close to home, the school Susie leads is near Kapoho. Kua'okala Public Charter School focuses on Hawaiian cultural values. The students and staff here know the power of Pele and rapidly evacuated.
This goes in the front seat.
As we were packing, all of a sudden, when I went out, the cracks went from 2 inches to 12 inches wide and 8 feet deep, and you could hear the rumbling.
By month's end, Susie's home was gone, sitting somewhere beneath the fissures now firing off in Leilani. Weeks later, the lava took her school too, along with the ancient Hawaiian fish ponds and archaeological treasures that sat nearby. The summer didn't give Susie much time to relocate. She eventually split her 200 students between 2 campuses in Hilo, 20 miles away. Some of those buildings are in need of major renovation.
Massive termite damage, about 2 full walls needed to be replaced, all the windows rebuilt.
If the stresses of 2 evacuations weren't enough, Susie and some of her neighbors found themselves in a fight with one of the largest insurance companies in the world.
Just heartbroken, frustrated, concerned, very concerned about the next steps in my life.
Lloyd's of London denied her claim for the loss of her home. You can tell in her voice that the usually outgoing educator has reached a breaking point.
I feel like I need some support, and I feel actually, very deceived by the process that occurred through the purchase of my insurance.
Susie lawyered up. Her suit alleged that homeowners were steered into buying Lloyd's of London insurance policies that contained numerous exclusions. Policies that were effectively worthless to lava victims, amounting to no coverage at all.
Unreal.
And she's not alone. Her neighbor, Howard Konanui, has lived in Puna his entire life. He's had trouble with Lloyd's as well.
Never in my lifetime I expected this to happen in my backyard. Puna was a very, very easy place, a good place to raise a family, because we were taught to live off the land. A lot of development happened and people moved in and we got more homes.
He ended up owning 2 of them on lots right next to each other. Both homes, he says, sustained significant damage during the eruption.
Everything is done. The roofing, gutters, fixtures, everything.
One home was insured by the Hawaii Property Insurance Association. The other home was insured by Lloyd's of London. Shortly after making his claim with HPIA, the state insurance carrier determined the home was a total loss and paid out its value in full, amounting to hundreds of thousands of dollars. His experience with Lloyd's of London was much different.
They just wanted to give me about $9,000 for my damages. That's all.
Howard buckled down and followed Susie's lead, hiring Jeffrey Foster, a Big Island lawyer, taking on many of these claims.
They didn't think that they would have to wait 60 days to get a denial of their claim. They didn't think they would be left to their own limited resources. You know, it's, from a human perspective, I think it's just a real tragedy when people are down and out and in need of the insurance that they paid so much for to be treated like, you know, second and third class citizens.
While Susie has since received a payment from Lloyd's of London, she and many others are still pursuing legal action against the company. As the anniversary of the eruption approaches, she sits as close as she can to where her home once stood. The dark and barren lava field belies a lively demeanor that's largely returned.
So this will either break you and ho, see you later, or you're going to rise up to the occasion and do whatever it takes to rebuild.
The trees from this land were stripped from existence, devoured by fronts of melted rock with temperatures that reached well above 1,000 degrees. Strong gusts now fill the fruitless space where a healthy jungle and hundreds of homes once were. On the edge of this desolate field, Chris Burmeister walks more than a story above where his home used to sit.
I ended up finding this neighborhood and I fell in love with it. I thought, wow, this is a good place to be.
His now covered lot holds buried secrets.
I didn't expect this to be here. I mean, it's all we had left that we could recognize from the property. So this used to be my kid's treehouse.
Chris has discovered a curious geological formation known as a lava tree. It was made when the molten hot lava cooled around the tree's trunk, creating a cast skeleton of what used to tower here. The deep, dangerous landmines are scattered across this post-apocalyptic plain.
It's about 10 feet deep and it spreads out in all directions where all the roots used to be. And it's big enough where you could probably put 6 people in it if you had to, like sleep comfortably, staring up at the stars at night. It's pretty crazy.
Though his property was wiped out, this father and military veteran is unyielding. Rather than flee, Chris is actually doubling down on the investment he made in this community. The home next to where his once stood remains untouched. Its owners chose not to come back. Burmeister decided to buy it. Turns out, this hardened dad has a softer side.
I bought the acre next to me. I got a pretty good deal on it. I just wanted to be close to something that I used to have. You know, I guess it's a little more sentimental to me.
When you look out over what used to be his sprawling neighborhood, the obvious question comes to mind. What's next for Leilani Estates?
I personally would rather not see it get developed. This was a pretty hard hit to everybody. It's the Lower East Rift Zone. I mean, it is what it is. It could pop up 2 years from now, 200 years from now. We don't know.
We became a state in 1959, and that's when the hordes came in to cut up our island.
Mayor Harry Kim is brutally honest about how developments like Leilani Estates came to be.
People of intent of making money as fast as they could, and I don't care who's watching it, that's the truth. All of these subdivisions, all were substandard. Empty promises with play of words of proposed roads, proposed shopping centers. Some of them were better than others.
Hello, your photographer narrator, Fred Rackle. It's almost a month following the Kilauea eruption, and we have signs of activity about 30 miles further along the Kilauea Rift. which is laced with the underground plumbing from Kilauea.
It was no secret, even back then, that these communities were being built on one of the most active volcanoes in the world.
Who would not fall in love with that place and say, wow, I can get an acre here and I'm on all these trees, relatively close to Hilo. People built their dream homes there, and I mean dream homes.
Kim himself was one of those once enticed by the cell of paradise in Puna.
I'm not much for materialism, but that's the one thing I thought was so special that I really wanted to leave for my children and children's children.
He had a home in Kapoho that was destroyed in last year's flow, one he had owned and cherished since the early 1970s.
If nature was going to allow me to enjoy this place for 20, 30, or 40 years, I'll grab it. Enjoyed it, my family enjoyed it. I have no regrets to buying it.
In the 1960s, newspaper ads lured buyers to the prospect of land in Leilani, as low as 4 cents per square foot, and 1 acre lots as low as $1,700.
Madam Pele had again been on a destructive rampage.
Their proximity to danger was easily evident. As developers worked to sell the subdivision, residents of Kapoho, situated just miles away, were struggling to save their livelihoods from an eruption. Despite frantic efforts to divert the flow with barricades or by spraying water, the flow buried the village. Nearly 100 homes and businesses were lost.
Very little is left of this once pretty little town. Just a few remaining stores that we see, looking down from the cinder-covered hillside.
So how could a brand new community be in the works when lava was wiping out another?
People from the outside in looking in and say, why did you allow that? We allowed it because the law allowed it. Pulling your horns and criticism before you know what you're talking about. Try to understand what had happened in regards to why they built there. And I think they'll understand that most of them built there because it was an acceptable risk.
Now, a year after the most recent eruption, though their properties are covered, some residents want to return and rebuild here. But is that even an option?
The different question is of this. Are you going to allow people to rebuild? On criticism that, know the law. If we as government say you own that property that was just covered and say, no, you cannot build there anymore, even though all of the risk is yours, you build a road, you put in the power, you put in the water, etc., and you take all the cost factor. If I say, no, we will not grant you a building permit, the law is quite simple. I have to compensate you for the loss of your use of your land. That will bankrupt this county government.
Long before it was called Leilani Estates, the surrounding area was known as Kiahi-Alaka, a region rich with ancient Hawaiian lore and legend. Puna was the place where Pele is said to have first made herself known on the island, bathing here and the now missing Green Lake. After hundreds of years of existence, Hawaii's largest lake was consumed by last year's eruption in less than 90 minutes, vanishing from the planet in a furious cloud of steam.
Oh, it feels like I'm home. Feels good to my heart. the most peaceful place that I've ever been on.
The lake and land, which hugged Green Mountain and hosted a popular farmers market, is maintained by Smiley Burrows and her family.
On a normal day, I was climbing coconut trees and harvesting fruit and jumping on my tractor.
She was actually living in Leilani Estates when the eruption started, then evacuated here, only to have to flee yet again as the flow made its way to the ocean.
In one day, we lost 3 structures. Is it the toughest year of my life? Yeah. Definitely this has been the most challenging year of my life. I've seen a lot of my friends are very traumatized. We all are healing from our losses.
Though her livelihood and its legendary ancient landscape have been consumed, Smiley stays true to her namesake, decidedly optimistic.
I see complete potential. I am very accepting of the new land that we have here in Puna. It's creation.
She wasn't always so resolute. Smiley credits the determination of her friends and neighbors for keeping everyone safe, sheltered, and informed.
So it's actually also been incredible to see a community work together in a way that I hadn't really seen before. So it's brought an incredible amount of aloha into our lives, which is really special.
The collaborations and coalitions formed during the eruption were remarkable.
Puna strong. Puna always comes together. And not only Puna, the islands. This is the Aloha state, so there's a lot of aloha out there.
Today, this ordinary tent sits on the side of the road in Pahoa. Flags still flying, but showing some signs of wear. It seems completely unassuming, but in reality, it's one of the most important landmarks of the eruption. Pu'uhonua o Puna became known as the hub, a place of refuge where so many evacuees found relief.
When everything is gone, there's just no way of replacing everything all at once, and to get back the little bit we've had, we can at least keep living. We can at least keep going, and to have food really helps.
So much people were hitting me up on social media about what I want to get back in. I want to get my pets. I want to get some stuffs out. I get importing paperwork. How can I get back in? So you know what? I made some calls. I had a vision of how this was going to go.
As lava spat out of the earth, people didn't just scramble for safety or supplies. Residents say the sometimes delayed or absent updates added to their anxiety.
Mostly they're talking about tide pools and beach lots. Those are just houses. We're the farmers down there. We've got 5 acres of farms. There's millions of dollars worth of revenue that we lost. We're the people that grow things, and that's how we support ourselves. We're independent people. We're not 9 to 5 and we don't have paid vacations. Right now, we don't have anything. And I don't know what to do. And I wish I could at least find out if I have a house.
I personally feel very grateful that Tracker is here.
That's where the Hawaii Trackers came in, a Facebook group that's now 50,000 members strong.
I think my way of coping maybe with everything that was going on was just staying hooked into what was happening and researching things as I could to help out.
The Tracker's goal was to provide verified information as promptly as possible, even as team members who lived in Leilani were being personally impacted by the eruption.
Immediately, I started to figure out that the county wasn't going to keep up and account for homes. My parents' home was the second home lost in the eruption, and there was 2 homes on the property, and civil defense told my parents that, oh, they're both gone. And I mean, it was like, no, that's not, one's gone. So I got thrown into it right away in terms of, okay, we're gonna have to fact check a lot of this stuff ourselves.
Up the road from the hub is Pahoa's main street. Unlike a separate flow nearly 5 years earlier, lava from this eruption never neared the small town, but businesses there are still struggling.
Lack of tourists that there are. Tourists want to see live lava, and what we've got is the steaming remains of last year's eruption. And so tourism has dropped down a lot, and businesses are off at least 50%.
If we get to go a second load, then we'll pick things that maybe would make our life more comfortable. But right now we're living out of a backpack.
The owner of Pele's Kitchen has a deeply personal connection to the eruption. Stephen Yunt was forced to evacuate his Leilani Estates home and farm.
It was miraculous, it seemed, after 5 months of Pele just onslaughting us. I live about 5 blocks from Fissure 8. We started moving back. It was too expensive to be gone. You know, we were paying our mortgage plus having to pay thousands of dollars in rental somewhere else.
Yunt says Puna's recovery is far from over.
Pele tests people, there's tests, and if you decide you want to go on, then you might have to change your whole life around. And if it doesn't work for you, then people go back to the mainland and give up.
Before lava covered Highway 132, the businesses of downtown Pahoa sat just 10 minutes from the iconic beaches of Poho'iki, where the eruption's lingering impacts are obvious.
Raised my kids over here, and when all the ramp was open and the boat ramp was open.
The flows surrounded the boat ramp at Isaac Hale Beach Park, creating a thermal ocean pond in its place.
The water was much colder, and yeah, it's much warmer now that it's all closed off.
Consisting of tiny fragments of volcanic basalt, the eruption turned the rocky shoreline here into a new black sand beach. The iconic red house by the boat ramp was spared by the lava, a reminder to visitors that Poho'iki is now a mix of old and new, forever changed, but no less beautiful. "4,000 feet above sea level, the summit of Kilauea looks much different than it did a year ago." The first sign of trouble was the collapse of the crater floor at Pu'u'o'o. As molten rock began flooding Puna's underground pipes and spilling out onto the rift zone, the lava lake inside Halema'uma'u dropped significantly, increasing the likelihood of steam explosions at the summit. The concerns prompted the closure of Hawaii Volcanoes National Park.
It is a completely unnerving experience to have to close a national park for safety reasons. We are used to opening Mauna Loa and Kilauea eruptions so the public can see it. That's what we want to share with the world. And to actually have to close it is a very unusual position to be in.
Weeks after the eruption began, their suspicions were confirmed. An explosion sent a plume of ash 30,000 feet into the air, the first of many that would choke nearby communities.
Parts of Halema'uma'u crater, the crater itself was much smaller than we have today. The crater was 280 feet deep, most, and now there's an area where it's 1,600 feet deep, and it just goes down into a really sharp, deep V. It's just really mind-boggling to see that, where before it was just a shallow, kind of a wide crater, and now we have a completely different feature happening here at the summit. Yes, so Jagger Museum remains closed. It is, right on the edge of this collapsing crater. Whether or not we'll be able to reopen that remains to be seen. Right now, we know it's not a safe place to be, and there's nobody really at Jagger except for the Nene.
The danger kept the park closed for months. It's since reopened, But attendance has dropped now that the main attraction is missing.
Visitation is still down. I think a lot of people don't realize the park is open, and we definitely want people to realize the park is open. Come and visit us. We don't know what's going to happen next with Kilauea, and certainly not Mauna Loa, so it's a really exciting time to visit Hawaii volcanoes.
So a tremendous increase in volume of the collapse feature here at the summit. One thing you notice by looking out in the distance right now is there still is some fume coming out of the inner pit of Halemaumau, and that is because there is still gas leaking out of magma that's still stored below the surface here. However, the levels of that gas output are dramatically down.
The Hawaiian Volcano Observatory used to call the summit home. Tina Neal is the scientist in charge. She and her team of researchers had to evacuate during the eruption. Their building heavily damaged by ground cracking. They have yet to return.
I think all of us miss very much being up here in the national park and working on the rim of Kilauea caldera. It was a tremendously inspirational place for scientists to work for a long time. You have to remember the history of HVO in this area goes back to 1912. So there's a tremendous legacy of scientists being up here in the national park studying Kilauea. So it is sad to not be here.
HVO has lowered the alert level at Kilauea from advisory to normal, signifying what the agency says is a return to a non-eruptive state.
Just because the eruption of lava has ended does not mean that there isn't future risk of outbreak. Of course, that is the big question we're trying to address right now, or one of many. What's going to happen next?
Quiet as the volcano might be at the moment, scientists warn that there's no telling how long this pause will last. Kilauea remains active and will erupt again, though it's impossible to be sure when exactly that might happen. Scientists' best estimate is that the next eruption could take place in the summit's caldera within a few years, and that the next eruption on one of the rift zones likely won't be for a decade or longer. That cautious reassurance is little relief for those who lost everything or are still trying to make the journey home.
A lot of our neighbors got wiped out, but we're still here. We're still, I'm pretty much confident that we'll be staying here for a long time, and we can still farm and we can still be productive, and my kids want to be farmers, and it's just, this is our future. We planned this, we dreamed it. We want everyone to be able to go home, to go to their property and do what they want to do with their land.
What a bunch of us have started to say, because we'll ask each other, how are you? Hey, how are you? And someone will say good, but what we all who live here now know is that our new good is not the same as our old good, that we're talking about a new life that's been changed to something that's not what we wanted and not what we wished upon each other.
It was so stressful, but you were so in the moment of the power of everything and the instant decisions you had to keep making, and you evacuate and then you come back to get more stuff and then you evacuate again. It was surreal.
If things don't happen better, a lot of the places are giving up, so we'll see. There's no way to tell. I'll hang in there till the bitter end.
There'll never be a normality. It's a dream world that will never be again. The dream worlds of the hundreds of people in the lower Puna, which includes Leilani, which includes Lani Puna, which includes Kapoho, Wawa, Vacationland, Pohiki, will never be the same.
It's also very humbling to see such power.
The healing's just going to go on for years and years, and I can look back when I'm 90 and go, wow, I was part of something big. because this eruption was just big.
We treasure these islands. Each of us can do our part in making Hawaii better. At Hawaiian Electric, we're committed to reaching our 100% clean energy future and reducing our carbon footprint. In collaboration with energy partners and with support from communities on Oahu, Maui, and Hawaii Island, we're introducing new solar projects generating enough energy to power more than 100,000 homes. Along with other renewable projects already online and in the works, we'll displace 100 million gallons of oil per year. Let's continue to work together to reduce our carbon footprint. Through energy efficiency, conservation, and more renewables, greenhouse gas emissions from our plants have fallen nearly 20%. Together, we can build sustainable and resilient communities, creating a better Hawaii for our families. Hawaiian Electric, empowering our 100% clean energy future. Empowering Hawaii. Empowering you.